James K. Polk was a determined Tennessee politician and masterful strategist who became one of America's most consequential presidents. James K. Polk, the 11th United States President, was born in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina on November 2, 1795. He came from a family of Scottish-Irish descent. He had a frail constitution in his youth. Polk's family moved to Tennessee when he was a boy seeking better opportunities in the expanding frontier. He was educated at home initially due to his poor health. When he was 17 years old, Polk underwent a dangerous surgery to remove gallstones without anesthesia, an ordeal that nearly killed him but seemed to strengthen his resolve and determination for the rest of his life. After recovering from his surgery, Polk threw himself into his studies with remarkable intensity. He enrolled at the University of North Carolina in 1816 and graduated with honors in 1818. He was known as a serious student who excelled in mathematics and the classics. Polk was not a natural orator like Henry Clay or Daniel Webster, but he compensated with tireless preparation and an encyclopedic command of facts and figures. After graduation, he returned to Tennessee to study law under the tutelage of Felix Grundy, one of the most prominent attorneys in Nashville. Polk was admitted to the bar in 1820 and began practicing law in Columbia, Tennessee. He quickly established himself as a skilled lawyer and a rising figure in Tennessee politics. In 1823, Polk was elected to the Tennessee House of Representatives. He was a protege of Andrew Jackson, the military hero who would soon become president. Polk aligned himself completely with Jackson's political philosophy and became one of his most loyal supporters. In 1824, Polk married Sarah Childress, the daughter of a wealthy merchant and planter. Sarah was educated, intelligent, and politically astute. She would become one of Polk's most trusted advisors throughout his political career. The marriage was a partnership in every sense. Sarah had no children, but she devoted herself entirely to advancing her husband's political ambitions. She managed his correspondence, advised him on political strategy, and served as his closest confidant. In 1825, Polk was elected to the United States House of Representatives. He would serve in the House for 14 years, eventually becoming Speaker of the House in 1835. Polk was a fierce partisan who fought for Jackson's agenda with unwavering loyalty. He supported Jackson's war against the Second Bank of the United States, believing like Jackson that the bank represented concentrated financial power that threatened democratic institutions. Polk earned the nickname Young Hickory because of his devotion to Old Hickory Andrew Jackson. As Speaker of the House, Polk was a skilled parliamentary tactician who controlled the flow of legislation and managed the Democratic majority with an iron hand. He was not beloved, but he was respected for his fairness and his mastery of House rules and procedures. In 1839, Polk left Congress to run for governor of Tennessee. He won the election and served as governor from 1839 to 1841. But his time as governor was difficult. The national economy was in depression and Tennessee faced severe financial problems. Polk lost his re-election bid in 1841 and lost again when he ran for governor in 1843. These defeats were devastating to Polk, who had never lost an election before. Many political observers thought his career was finished. Polk was 48 years old and appeared to be a has-been politician with no future prospects. But Polk was not ready to give up. He set his sights on the vice presidency in 1844. The Democratic Party was deeply divided over the question of Texas annexation and the expansion of slavery into new territories. The leading candidate for the Democratic nomination was Martin Van Buren, the former president who had lost his re-election bid in 1840. But Van Buren made a fatal mistake. He came out against the immediate annexation of Texas, fearing it would provoke war with Mexico and inflame sectional tensions over slavery. Andrew Jackson, who still wielded enormous influence in the Democratic Party, was furious with Van Buren. Jackson believed that Texas must be annexed to secure American interests and prevent British interference in North America. At the Democratic Convention in Baltimore in May 1844, Van Buren could not secure the two-thirds majority needed for the nomination. The convention deadlocked through multiple ballots. On the ninth ballot, the delegates turned to James K. Polk as a compromise candidate. Polk was the first dark horse candidate in American presidential history. He had not even been considered for the presidency when the convention began. The Whig Party nominated Henry Clay, the great compromiser who had dominated American politics for 3 decades. Clay was confident of victory. He supposedly asked, "Who is James K. Polk?" when he heard of his opponent's nomination. The question became a Whig campaign slogan meant to mock Polk's relative obscurity on the national stage. But Polk ran an aggressive campaign focused on territorial expansion. His platform called for the re-annexation of Texas and the reoccupation of Oregon. The Oregon Territory was jointly occupied by Britain and the United States, and there was growing sentiment for American control of the entire territory up to the 54° 40' latitude line, the southern border of Russian Alaska. 54-40 or fight became a rallying cry for expansionist Democrats. Polk also benefited from the third-party candidacy of James Birney, who ran on the anti-slavery Liberty Party ticket. Birney drew votes away from Clay in key states like New York. In the end, Polk won one of the closest elections in American history. He defeated Clay by fewer than 40,000 votes out of nearly 3 million cast. Polk won the Electoral College 170 to 105. James K. Polk was inaugurated as president on March 4, 1845. He was 49 years old, the youngest president elected up to that time. In his inaugural address, Polk made clear his commitment to territorial expansion. He declared that the American claim to Oregon was clear and unquestionable, and that Texas should be admitted to the Union as soon as possible. Polk was a man with a mission. He had specific goals he wanted to accomplish, and he was determined to achieve them all in a single term. Polk privately told his Secretary of the Navy George Bancroft that he had 4 great objectives for his presidency. First, he would reduce the tariff. Second, he would re-establish an independent treasury. Third, he would settle the Oregon boundary dispute with Britain. Fourth, he would acquire California from Mexico. Polk set to work immediately with characteristic intensity. He worked long hours every day, often late into the night. He involved himself in every detail of government operations. He was a micromanager who trusted few people and delegated little authority. Polk kept a detailed diary throughout his presidency, recording his thoughts, his frustrations, and his assessments of the people around him. The diary reveals a man who was suspicious, thin-skinned, and convinced that he was surrounded by incompetents and self-seekers. Polk had few friends and little patience for small talk or social pleasantries. He was all business all the time. In December 1845, Texas was admitted to the Union as the 28th state. Mexico had warned that annexation would be considered an act of war. Mexico had never recognized Texas' independence after the Texas Revolution of 1836 and considered Texas to be a rebellious province. The admission of Texas immediately created a crisis. There was also a boundary dispute. Texas claimed the Rio Grande as its southern border, while Mexico insisted the border was the Nueces River farther north. Polk sent troops under General Zachary Taylor to the disputed territory between the 2 rivers. He also sent diplomat John Slidell to Mexico City with an offer to purchase California and New Mexico and to settle the Texas boundary dispute. The Mexican government refused to receive Slidell. The Mexicans were in no mood to negotiate the sale of their territory to the United States. In April 1846, Mexican troops crossed the Rio Grande and attacked American forces. 11 American soldiers were killed. Polk now had his justification for war. He told Congress that Mexico had invaded American territory and shed American blood upon American soil. Congress declared war on Mexico on May 13, 1846. The Mexican-American War had begun. The war was controversial from the start. Many Northerners believed it was a war of aggression designed to extend slavery into new territories. A young congressman from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln repeatedly challenged Polk to identify the exact spot where American blood had been shed on American soil. But Polk pressed forward with the war effort. He was determined to achieve his territorial objectives. The war went well for the United States. American forces won victory after victory. General Zachary Taylor defeated the Mexicans at Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma in May 1846. In September, Taylor captured the city of Monterrey. In February 1847, Taylor won a decisive victory at the Battle of Buena Vista against a much larger Mexican force commanded by General Santa Anna. Meanwhile, General Stephen Kearny led an expedition that captured New Mexico and California. And General Winfield Scott launched an amphibious invasion at Veracruz and fought his way inland toward Mexico City. Scott's campaign was a brilliant military achievement. He defeated the Mexicans in a series of battles and captured Mexico City in September 1847. The war was effectively over. While the war was being fought, Polk was also dealing with the Oregon question. Britain and the United States had been jointly occupying Oregon for decades. Polk had campaigned on 50-40 or fight, but he knew that war with Britain over Oregon was not practical, especially while fighting Mexico. Polk negotiated a compromise with Britain. The Oregon Treaty of 1846 established the border between the United States and British Canada at the 49th parallel, extending the existing border westward to the Pacific Ocean. The United States gained the territory that would become Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. Polk achieved his third objective without firing a shot. In 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican-American War. Mexico recognized the Rio Grande as the southern boundary of Texas and ceded California and New Mexico to the United States. In return, the United States paid Mexico $15 million and assumed over $3 million in claims by American citizens against Mexico. The Mexican cession added over 500,000 square miles to the United States, including all or part of the future states of California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. Polk had achieved his fourth objective. In less than 4 years, Polk had expanded the territory of the United States by more than 1 million square miles. The continental United States now stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Polk also achieved his domestic policy objectives. In 1846, Congress passed the Walker Tariff, which significantly reduced tariff rates. Polk believed that high tariffs benefited manufacturers at the expense of farmers and consumers. The lower tariff was a victory for Polk's democratic philosophy of limited government and free trade. Also in 1846, Congress re-established the independent treasury system that had been created under Van Buren but abolished under the Whigs. The independent treasury kept government funds separate from private banks. Polk believed this protected the government from the instability and corruption of the banking system. Polk had accomplished all 4 of his major objectives. But the territorial expansion that Polk achieved came at an enormous cost. The acquisition of vast new territories reopened the bitter debate over slavery. Would slavery be permitted in the new territories, or would they be free? The question threatened to tear the nation apart. In 1846, Congressman David Wilmot of Pennsylvania introduced a provision that would ban slavery in any territory acquired from Mexico. The Wilmot Proviso passed the House but failed in the Senate. The proviso became a rallying point for anti-slavery forces and a source of outrage in the South. Polk opposed the Wilmot Proviso. He believed the slavery question should be left to the people of each territory to decide for themselves. But Polk's territorial expansion had made the slavery issue unavoidable. The sectional crisis that would lead to the Civil War 13 years later had its roots in Polk's expansionist policies. Polk kept his promise to serve only 1 term. He was exhausted by the demands of the presidency and his health was failing. He had worked himself nearly to death. Polk left office on March 4, 1849 and returned to Tennessee with Sarah. He was only 53 years old, but he looked much older. His hair had turned gray and his face was deeply lined. Polk had driven himself relentlessly for 4 years and his body had paid the price. He began a tour of the South but soon fell ill with cholera. He returned to his home in Nashville where his condition worsened. James K. Polk died on June 15, 1849, just 3 months after leaving office. He was the youngest former president to die. Polk's presidency is one of the most remarkable in American history. He set clear goals and achieved every one of them. He expanded the United States to the Pacific Ocean and made America a continental power. He was a president who knew what he wanted and had the determination and skill to get it. But Polk's legacy is complicated. His territorial expansion came through war with Mexico, a war that many considered unjust and aggressive. The territories he acquired led directly to the sectional crisis over slavery that culminated in the Civil War. Polk himself owned slaves throughout his life. He bought and sold enslaved people and profited from their labor. He never questioned the morality of slavery and defended it as a constitutional right. When he died, he did not free his slaves. They remained in bondage under Sarah's ownership until the end of the Civil War. Historians have debated Polk's place in American history for generations. Some rank him as a near-great president who achieved his objectives and expanded American power and prosperity. Others view him as an aggressive imperialist whose policies led to unnecessary war and deepened the divisions that would tear the nation apart. Polk was a man of his time who believed in manifest destiny, the idea that America was destined to expand across the continent. He believed that American expansion would spread democracy and opportunity. He did not foresee, or perhaps did not care, that his policies would lead to catastrophic consequences. What is clear is that James K. Polk was one of the most effective presidents in American history if effectiveness is measured by accomplishing stated goals. He was a master of political strategy and legislative tactics. He was disciplined, focused, and tireless in pursuit of his objectives. He dominated his cabinet and controlled his party. He was not a great communicator or an inspiring leader, but he was a supremely competent executive who got things done. Polk understood power and how to use it. He was willing to take risks and make difficult decisions. He was not paralyzed by doubt or deterred by criticism. He knew what he believed and he acted on those beliefs with unwavering determination. Polk's marriage to Sarah was central to his success. Sarah was intelligent, politically savvy, and completely devoted to her husband's career. She served as his advisor, his confidant, and his partner in every sense. She managed the White House with efficiency and grace. She hosted receptions and dinners that were important for political networking, but she banned dancing and card playing because of her strict Presbyterian beliefs. Sarah was deeply religious and she brought a moral seriousness to the White House. After Polk's death, Sarah lived for another 42 years. She never remarried. She devoted herself to preserving her husband's memory and defending his legacy. She remained active in Democratic Party politics and was consulted by politicians and historians who wanted to understand the Polk presidency. The Mexican-American War that Polk prosecuted so vigorously transformed the United States. The war demonstrated American military power and proved that the United States could project force beyond its borders. The war also created military heroes like Zachary Taylor and Winfield Scott, who would play important roles in American politics. Many of the officers who fought in the Mexican-American War, including Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee, would face each other again in the Civil War. The war gave them valuable combat experience and tested their leadership abilities. Grant later wrote in his memoirs that the Mexican-American War was one of the most unjust wars ever waged by a stronger nation against a weaker one. But at the time, Grant was a young lieutenant who followed orders and did his duty. The discovery of gold in California in 1848, just days before the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, vindicated Polk's territorial ambitions in the eyes of many Americans. The California gold rush brought hundreds of thousands of people to the West and created enormous wealth. California's admission as a free state in 1850 as part of the Compromise of 1850 further complicated the sectional balance between North and South. The territories that Polk acquired became the battleground for the struggle over slavery's expansion. The question of whether slavery would be permitted in Kansas and Nebraska in the 1850s led to violence and bloodshed that foreshadowed the Civil War. The Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, and the Dred Scott Decision of 1857 were all attempts to resolve the crisis created by territorial expansion. Polk's commitment to manifest destiny reflected the attitudes of many Americans in the 1840s. Americans believed they had a God-given right and duty to expand across the continent. They believed American institutions and values were superior and should be spread to new territories. This belief justified the displacement and destruction of Native American peoples who had lived on the land for thousands of years. It justified war with Mexico to seize Mexican territory. It reflected a sense of racial and cultural superiority that was widespread in 19th-century America. Polk never questioned these assumptions. He believed that American expansion was inevitable and beneficial. He saw himself as an instrument of destiny fulfilling America's continental mission. The Polk presidency demonstrates both the possibilities and the dangers of strong executive leadership. Polk showed that a determined president with clear objectives can accomplish great things. He expanded American territory, strengthened American power, and achieved his policy goals. But he also showed that presidential power can be used to pursue policies that are morally questionable and have unintended consequences. The war with Mexico was controversial then and remains controversial now. The territories Polk acquired led to a crisis that nearly destroyed the nation. Strong leadership is not always wise leadership. Effectiveness is not the same as righteousness. James K. Polk died believing he had served his country well. He had fulfilled his campaign promises and achieved his stated objectives. He had made America a continental nation stretching from sea to shining sea. He could not have known that the territories he acquired would become the fault line that would split the nation apart. He could not have foreseen that the question of slavery in the territories would lead to the bloodiest war in American history. Or perhaps he did foresee it but believed the risk was worth taking. Polk was a gambler who bet that America could absorb vast new territories without destroying itself. He won his bet in the short term, but the long-term consequences were catastrophic. Today James K. Polk is not well remembered by most Americans. He does not have the fame of Washington or Lincoln or the Roosevelts. He is not celebrated in popular culture or commemorated with grand monuments. But historians recognize his significance. He was a consequential president who changed the map of America and set in motion forces that would shape the nation's future. He was a man of limited vision but unlimited determination. He was a skilled politician but not a great statesman. He achieved his goals but at a terrible cost. He expanded American power but deepened American divisions. He was in the end a tragic figure whose greatest achievements contained the seeds of disaster. James K. Polk was the president who made America a continental nation and in doing so helped set America on the path to civil war.